Hi everybody, Jeff Yasteen here. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. And also I'm pleased to announce the publication of my new subscription-only monthly newsletter. It's called Next Gen Profits, and I encourage you to check it out. Now, I've done two videos in recent weeks talking about the cannabis sector and opportunities within the marijuana sector. And I want to go back over those because marijuana stocks, pot stocks have been very hot since then, and we've seen some backtracking over the last day or so as more results have come out. But my encouragement here is to basically hold the line on these because the overall theme that I painted in my videos remains exactly the same, and if anything, the announcements coming out of the companies is only confirming what I told you about in my first video about a month ago. And here is the video that I did, again, about a month ago, and we headlined it, "These pot stocks should rip higher following the Georgia Senate races," and of course they did. And I also did one other stock, in this one here, I called it, "This Next Gen Pot Stock Could See Big Gains." And that's certainly been the case with the first stock I recommended a month ago. That was Afria, symbol APHA, and it's up basically about 200%, even with the profit taking that I'm seeing today. It's up about 200% since I recommended it. Another one that I recommended is this one here, Canopy Growth, CGC. It's up about 67% since I suggested it as a buy in my video a month ago. Another is this one, TrueLeave. It's a bulletin board stock, but it has a great deal of volume and a lot of support on the street, TCNNF. That one's up about 27%. And the last of the stocks I mentioned, again, it was in its own standalone separate video at the beginning here in February. That's Village Farms, and this is basically one of the largest growers of indoor produce. They have many acres of greenhouses, and basically about the middle point of last year, they decided they would begin transitioning some of those greenhouses to growing cannabis as well. So they're sort of a new entrant in the cannabis sector, and they're up about 24% since that video. But I continue to believe that the overall outlook for the sector continues to improve. Obviously, if the overall market itself heads south for a time, these stocks are going to fall with it. So you have to keep that in mind regarding the timing of these sorts of things. But the overall outlook, I think, is improving, not just because of the Georgia Senate races, obviously with expectations that we'll see more clarification in the way of federal banking laws and those sorts of things, which have a big impact on the growth or not growth of the cannabis sector. But the other element here is the focus on continuing profitability, and we see that with this headline here from Canopy Growth, where the company expects a profit in the second half of 2022. Now, this is exactly what I was saying would be my outlook based on what I saw of the fundamentals of these stocks in my videos. And I continue to believe that will be the case. And as we see these companies hopefully fulfill on their expectations and promises of reaching a degree of profitability, I think that will continue to support this sector. Again, not straight up from here, but I think we'll see more support, and we'll see more institutional support in terms of large funds, hedge funds, mutual funds, et cetera, coming in and buying this sector as it reaches more, let's call it legitimacy. And again, the key for anything regarding sustainable stock prices is generating good cash flow, or being on that path towards generating cash flow, rising revenues, which these companies have, of course, but also a path towards profitability. And really, for the first time since I've been watching the sector, more of the companies within the sector are on that path in a legitimate way, and I think that will continue to support these shares. But one thing to keep in mind with sort of chaotic sectors like cannabis, where there's a lot of interesting, exciting things and stocks move sharply higher, but of course there's volatility to the downside as well. The thing to keep in mind is it takes a while often for Wall Street analysts, the folks who write research reports on these kinds of companies, to sort of catch up And of course, they're trying to make sure that they're not falling behind on the overall sentiment as well, because if they're, perhaps less than bullish or not as bullish and the shares shoot higher, it makes them look bad. So, they have to sort of adjust on the fly as well. And you can kind of see that with the reports coming out from the various analysts, like for instance, Canopy Growth here. So Canopy Growth's price target was raised by an analyst at CIBC to $64. That's Canadian dollars, just in the last day or so. That's a nice upgrade. But at the same time, if we look down here, we can also see that the same stock was downgraded to reduce from market perform by an analyst at a different firm. And we can also see, again, here's the same thing except in the opposite direction. This is from a handful of days ago with an analyst at MKM Partners raising his target to $55 Canadian. But then down here, another analyst at Stifel says sell after perplexing outperformance. And likewise down here, another analyst at Canaccord basically also downgraded it to a sell. And yet, again, continuing the same theme, another Canopy Growth analyst at Cantor Fitzgerald, a very well-respected, well-known firm, raised his estimate, target price rather, to $62 from $50. So hopefully that demonstrates the degree of chaos that's out there in a sector like this. And this is sort of a common thing when you have a group of stocks that, number one, have been largely out of favor for the last 2 or 3 years. I know people have been talking about them, and they've certainly gotten a lot more buzz in the last few months, and especially in anticipation of the November elections and then the Georgia Senate elections as well. But a lot of folks had sort of written these stocks off, in part because they had a gigantic run-up a handful of years ago, and after that, I think, in my opinion, a lot of the action, the speculative action, moved out of these. They moved up to unsustainable levels, and as they did, traders basically moved out of those en masse into various kinds of tech stocks, and of course into, I believe, Bitcoin as well. So now we have this other situation where I believe we're going to see more institutional money flowing into these stocks. And when you have institutional traders at work in this kind of an area in a big way, it can tend to lead to very large moves up and down. So the key here is to stay the course on these sorts of things. Don't get too downtrodden, let's say, regarding the share prices if they happen to fall 20 or 30%. From a high, simply because I think that's the way these stocks are going to trade for quite a while as institutions move into them in a bigger way. And it's going to take time. It'll probably take another year or two before they can really get fully filled up on their shares that they need to fulfill their requirements in their portfolios. So overall, I think that means that we're going to see a general trend higher, but it also means that we have to be patient on these kinds of stocks as well, with that overall theme of profitability. That is the key element here as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that you should keep in mind for the cannabis sector, again, not necessarily today or next week, but as a continuing theme here that I think will also support these stocks and push them higher, is the idea of mergers and acquisitions. I touched on this a little bit in my first video, but that is a theme that I think we'll see come to an even larger profile in coming quarters. And you can see that with, let me go to the thing here, with something like Village Farms, which the Raymond James analyst back in late December said that they see it as situated well for cannabis sector consolidation. The point being here that Aphria and Tilray have already announced their merger last year, and there's a thought out there amongst investment bankers and others that with this sort of evolving legislative structure for cannabis stocks with federal law, as well as the maturation and the focus on a path towards profitability for many of these companies, and some like Village Farms are already profitable in their operations, that we are only in the beginning phase of some sort of merger an acquisition wave where you'll find, one company buys another, and then two other companies team up and they buy somebody else. And I think we're going to continue to see that as something that will build and build as the sort of cannabis sector here matures and becomes a larger part of the overall stock market portfolios for Wall Street institutions, and more awareness, and of course also its growth as a marketplace within not just the US, but Latin America, Europe as well. So if you like what I'm talking about here, keep your eye on the cannabis sector. I think it's going to continue to move, broadly higher. Just be patient about these sorts of things. And if you like what I'm talking about, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter and Facebook, and don't forget to check out my new newsletter as well. I'm Jeff Yasteen. We'll see you again later.